This is Trinity Storm and you are watching 8th part of What If Naruto Was Bastard Son of Minato. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Naruto patiently waited in the Uchiha section of the village for one Sasuke Uchiha to return home. He'd given the young man until the end of the Chunin exams to deliver him his payment for the return of his testicles, and the exams were officially over. So he sat here, waiting for him to return. But he hadn't been idle this entire time because he had dispatched crows to deliver two packages, one to Choji and the other to Shino. They had been a part of the group that had bullied him when he was younger, so they were also a part of his vendetta, and he had not forgotten about them. He smirked as he reflected on how he got back at them because the way he did so was so perfect because it was tailored for each person to ruin their lives just as they had ruined his without remorse. Shino had a rigged box pull a chemical he concocted that was poisonous only to bugs while leaving humans alive. He'd made it for a man who had a major bug infestation in his home. It had taken a long time to fine-tune the batch for actual use, but it would be worth it in the end. The kicker about this poison he concocted was that it soaked into a person's skin down to the bone and stayed there, so any attempts to implant more bugs would fail because they would die just being on him, let alone inside him. Shino would be outed from his clan for sure after that happened because their clan used bug-related jutsu and not being able to do so would make him the family's black sheep to the point of being disowned. He had something else planned for Choji that would most likely have the same outcome. It was a cursed pie Naruto had purchased from a strange old woman who liked to curse people for any damn reason. The only reason she didn't curse Naruto, who was there in the first place looking for a specific herb for research, was because he cured her blindness and gave her new eyes so she could see again. In retrospect, he wasn't sure whether that was a good or bad thing given her actions, but it kept his ass from being cursed, so he didn't have to think about the consequences. He had considered killing her to save others in the future, but after thinking about it from a different angle, he realized she only ever cursed people who trespassed onto her land, so it wasn't like she was hunting people down to curse, so it wasn't really fair to kill her for that. So, since she had nothing of monetary value due to her hermit lifestyle, he asked for a curse that he could pass on to another instead. She cackled like a typical evil witch from a fairy tale and told him that such a thing was simple to make. So he requested a pie that cursed anyone who ate it with losing weight so quickly that they had to eat so much to keep from starving. The woman had made him such a pie, which he had frozen for later use, heated up, and delivered to Choji in the hospital with a "get well" card so he didn't get suspicious. People wished the boy well on his road to recovery while he was in the hospital recovering from having a puppet explode in his face. His crow had watched as the boy ate the entire pie by himself and flew away to inform Naruto, who simply laughed because the boy was both an idiot and a glutton. Thankfully, he didn't have to wait long because Sasuke eventually arrived at his house. Naruto mentally chuckled because he had actually guessed which one Sasuke had lived in despite the fact that he had no idea where he lived in this area. The area was large, with many empty houses because the Uchiha who once lived there had been killed by the man he had killed before harvesting his eyes. He wondered if the Uchiha spirits could sense this, and if so, how they felt about the situation. Would they be happy that he had personally avenged them, or would they be angry that Sasuke hadn't done it himself, given that it was his duty as the clan's sole survivor to do so? It didn't matter to him either way because he didn't care. "Hello there, Sasuke," Naruto said, leaning against the wall next to the front door. Sasuke dropped the groceries he was holding because Naruto was here to collect the money Sasuke owed him. "I've come to collect the money you owe me. So I'll ask you if you have any of my money." I'm sorry," stuttered Sasuke as the memory of Naruto's threat flashed back to him, and dear Kami, picturing it alone horrified him. "I've been so busy that I haven't had time to collect everything. Please give me a little more time, and I'll get it for you. I swear it was an honest mistake." "Oh." Naruto smiled as he opened his pocket watch and looked at the time for a moment before closing it and putting it back into his pocket. "If it was an honest mistake, then no harm or foul." Everything will be fine if you pay me within the next day or so. Naruto then walked by Sasuke, lightly slapping his cheek a couple of times as he did so. Sasuke finally took a deep breath as Naruto walked by, because he was terrified that Naruto would punish him for not having the money owed as agreed. "Wait a sec," Naruto said as he came to a halt a few yards from where Sasuke was still standing. "Before I go, I have a quick question for you." Sasuke then felt pain like he'd never felt before as his leg bent in an unnatural way, breaking it with the bone inside visible due to the way it was bent. Naruto had put some blood in his palm while slapping Sasuke, allowing him to do this to the fucker without realizing it. "Does that hurt?" said Naruto, turning around to speak to him with a sinister grin on his face. "Yes," screamed Sasuke in pain, wanting to do something, anything, to get his leg back in place, but his body wouldn't listen for some reason. "What are you thinking? I will return your money." "Oh, I believe you will," Naruto said calmly, yet chillingly, "and usually I have more leniency for payment with people because things happen. But I gave you a specific payment deadline, and I have no patience for you of all people. What did I do to you?" Sasuke screamed, but his screams were only heightened as Naruto repeated the process with his other leg. "What did you do?" Naruto asked, raising an eyebrow. "Sasuke, did you think I'd forget what you did to me after all these years? Take a look at what I've done to everyone in your old group." Kiba's limbs were severed with no way of healing. Naruto was poisoned in such a way that she will never recover. And so on. Then there's you. The person I despised the most out of all of them. Kiba was my fourth most despised person, and you saw how that worked out for him. As Naruto approached, Sasuke gulped loudly. It wasn't like he could crawl away with his legs messed up and his body stiff from Naruto controlling his blood. "You remember that day I'm talking about, Sasuke," Naruto said, glaring. "The day you unlocked your fucking Sharingan? You were so proud of it, but you just had to see for yourself how powerful they were and how they used me as a test subject. You gladly used them on me, giving me the order to slit my own throat with a sharp broken piece of glass. But, for reasons I'll never understand, most likely a strong will to live, I broke free from your hypnosis and lived past that day. You attempted to end my life as a test, and that alone solidifies my hatred for you. But wait. It gets even worse from there." At this point, Sasuke had literally pissed himself in fear because he could feel Naruto's rage as he was so close to him. Naruto could strangle him if he wanted to because he was so close. "After 9 long years away from this hellhole I was born into," Naruto said, holding out his hands to emphasize that he was speaking about the village as a whole, "which I grew stronger and became as I am. I met you again by pure chance. We happened to run into each other again that day in Wave by chance. But you had to say the worst of the worst out of all the horrible things I could have heard from you." At this point, Naruto's eyes transformed into the Mangekyo Sharingan as he grabbed Sasuke by the throat and began to squeeze hard enough to allow Sasuke to breathe, albeit barely, if his gasps were any indication. "You had the audacity to threaten my girlfriend with rape," exclaimed Naruto, his eyes filled with rage. He had very few true friends, and he would defend them to the bitter end if necessary, as evidenced by his massacre of the shinobi of Kiri. But no. You also had to say that you would drag her back here, have a Yamanaka member alter her memories, and then forcefully impregnate her in order to carry your bastard children. Is there any low to which you will not sink? And you have the audacity to claim to be a member of an elite clan when you have attempted such atrocities before the age of 18. Naruto then threw Sasuke, and when I say throw, I mean it with enough force that he not only soared through the air, but also went through several of his house's walls before coming to a halt as he hit the last one that was too soft to break through. Sasuke was coughing up a lot of blood at this point, and his heart was racing from fear of what was about to happen to him. Naruto simply appeared in front of him, his glare still present, but this time he was sitting cross-legged in front of Sasuke, who was too weak to move as blood pooled from his head downwards. "But, you see," Naruto said as he took a deep breath. Despite all odds, I still have the tiniest shred of patience with you. So, Mr. Elite, here's how it's going to go down. Naruto took out a bottle containing an orange liquid. This was a concoction he made that dramatically increased blood production when it was dangerously low. His bloodline had caused him to reach that point a few times, so being prepared for such an event was always a good thing. Naruto could see that Sasuke was bleeding excessively and would not live long if he did not drink this. The first thing you'll do is drink this, Naruto said, pointing to the bottle. It's not poison, but medicine to replenish the blood you lost. Then I'll heal your legs, not out of friendship or kindness, because you're the last person on the planet I'd consider a friend. If you can't walk, you can't collect the money you owe me. Naruto then took out his pocket watch and noticed that it was nearly noon. He then closed it and returned it to his pocket. It's noon now, Naruto said, standing up and clenching his fists inward. Sasuke groaned in agony as he felt the wires Naruto used to lift him off the ground. He screamed as the wires pulled his legs back into place, and Naruto used his blood inside Sasuke to heal everything back to normal. But there was a visible scar to show what had occurred, and Naruto made no attempt to remove it because he wanted Sasuke to remember what had occurred here for years to come. Naruto then took the bottle and pinched Sasuke's nose, forcing him to open wide. He then poured the medicine down his throat, which Sasuke had to admit was not as bad tasting as he had expected medicine to be. That was due to the numerous citrus fruits he added, which naturally helped heal from blood loss. So you've got until 5 o'clock to get the money you owe me. And if you don't do it this time, I won't do what I said before about the horrifyingly painful sex change, no. Sasuke, I'll do far worse. I'm going to kill you. But it won't happen quickly. I'll peel you apart layer by layer so you don't die but still feel everything. I'll make you watch through a mirror as I do it, and the last thing you'll see before you die is me crushing the tainted thing in my hand after ripping it out through your exposed ribcage. When he heard this, Sasuke was terrified to the point of having a heart attack. The visions in his head were terrifying enough, and he didn't want to imagine what it would be like to actually experience it. So, my advice to you, Uchiha. Naruto said as he whipped his hand around, freeing Sasuke from the wires that had bound him a second ago. Runa. Sasuke heeded his single piece of advice and dashed towards the bank, leaving Naruto speechless. Sasuke may have talked a big game, but he lacked the skills to pay the bills. And now that he was finally done here, despite the fact that he had to return to get his money, he exited through his door to finish up 2 other tasks. The first place he went was AIM, where he was met with hostility. It wasn't Nagato or Konan who showed it, but the shinobi who set it up. Nagato was their leader, and it was their duty to protect him. They only stood down due to Nagato's intervention via one of his paths because they finally accepted that he was not here to attack their leader. Naruto followed the path to Nagato and informed him that his body had been completed. It surprised him that it was completed so quickly, but research he conducted on the genetics of the Uzumaki he took from him revealed that they healed faster than most people. He wasn't sure how that aided the cloning process, but he had nothing else to go on and would have to spend months, if not years, researching to see if that was the case, and he already had a lot on his plate. So Naruto motioned for the 2 of them to follow him through the door into his operating room, oblivious to the glare of a masked man in the shadows who had overheard everything that was going on right now. The procedure was straightforward, with Nagato's new body strapped down because it was better to ensure it didn't wiggle around too much than to be unprepared for it. So, with a quick room and shambles, Nagato was back in his prime body, free of the life support device that had been keeping him alive for years. Konan was speechless, because even though she had witnessed his power firsthand when he demonstrated it the first time, it was still difficult for her to believe that he could heal Nagato as he had. Nagato thanked Naruto before walking out the door with Konan back to their hideout, their business completed. Naruto did warn him one last time before leaving that if he continued down the path he had originally planned, his advanced healing process would be for naught because even he could not cure death and would never attempt to because he was neither a god nor a necromancer. He had no intention of playing God and would remain so. But whether Nagato heeded his words, only time will tell. But Naruto sincerely hoped he had stopped his plan, because otherwise he would have to kill the man who would come after not only himself because he was now the container of the Kyuubi, albeit temporarily, but also two of his friends, one of whom was his girlfriend, which meant he would kill the man if he dared to try and extract the beast from her because the process was fatal. Naruto took a few moments after finishing his business with Nagato to brew some tea, which helped him relax, as well as light a cigarette because he needed to be as calm as possible for what was about to happen next. After finishing the tea and smoking, he opened another door to find one of the two people he needed to speak with. Naruto felt angry with himself as well as stupid for being so oblivious to Kuroshi's love for him. But because his mind was usually preoccupied with medicine and surgery, he was oblivious to almost everything else at the most inopportune times. His desire for vengeance had consumed the rest of his brainpower that wasn't being used to develop new methods of healing. But, because he wasn't doing research at the time, he was able to think more clearly with most of those he wanted revenge against. The fact that Kurosuchi had wagered everything on the rights to his love with Haku solidified this knowledge. He had no idea what to do because, as a doctor, he loved to help people as well as heal, and the emotional pain of a broken heart was all too familiar to him. Sure, it wasn't due to the loss of a lover, but it was his only living solace, which hurt just as much as contemplating suicide in his youth. He overcame such emotions and lived on, but he had reached a low point in his willpower. So he met Kurosuchi, who had read his note in which he stated that he wanted to sit both girls down and talk this over. So he used his door to transport her to his spring home, where Haku awaited them. To say their animosity was thick would be an understatement. The two girls argued for about an hour before Naruto opened his mouth to say the first thing he'd say in this conversation. He basically stated that he loved both of them, because Kurosuchi was his first true friend and Haku was his first girlfriend. He admitted to being oblivion, with Haku's obvious advances being a key factor in how severe it was, and as they were now, with the rivalry reaching new heights to the point where they were betting on him like some sort of fucking prize, he demanded they stop or he would simply cut ties with both of them. He left the house after saying his piece to go check on Yuna. The silence that followed his departure was long and awkward, as they had both been confronted with the reality of their selfishness. It was true that they had bet on Naruto in their fight without consulting him, and both women understood where he was coming from because he disliked making people sad. Unless it was out of vengeance, but you'd have to really irritate him to get to that point. So, with the awkwardness out of the way, they resumed their conversation as adults rather than fighting as children. Naruto had returned outside his house after dropping off money for Yuna and checking his logbook to see if he had any upcoming appointments. He stayed outside because he had no idea what was going to happen. He wondered if he had made a mistake, but he wanted the bickering to stop, mainly because people in this world were killed for reasons such as jealousy, and he didn't need one or the other murdering because hearing they had died would only cause him grief. Imagine his surprise when he walked into the house and the two people in front of him hugged him tightly, tears in their eyes and constant apologies coming from their mouths. Naruto was surprised, but he accepted it and hugged them back because he was relieved that they weren't killing each other as he had feared. But, while Naruto was preoccupied with the few errands he needed to complete before this heartfelt moment, another person was about to suffer greatly in complete contrast to what Naruto was experiencing. Earlier that day in Konoha, Kushina sat at home, deep in thought, staring at the scroll Naruto had left her to deliver to Minato. As she sat there staring at the thing, time seemed to move at a glacial pace. So many conflicting emotions were racing through her mind that she had no idea how to deal with them. On the one hand, she had a message from the man who had essentially poisoned her daughter and left her with no hope of recovery. This part of her brain was screaming at her to destroy the note because she owed the man nothing. But on the other side of her mind was the more inquisitive side, the side that recognized a genetic blood seal of all things. This was the side that wanted answers to the central question of Naruto and Minato's relationship. But the more her thoughts turned to the latter, the more fear she felt, because it opened up a whole new slew of questions she wasn't sure she wanted to ask. But in the end, it was her more curious side that triumphed. So she picked up the note, took a deep breath, and went to her husband's office to discuss the situation. As Kushina entered the office, Minato was busy with his usual amount of paperwork. He was too preoccupied with the damned process to notice that Kushina had installed a silencing seal on the door, ensuring that their conversation could not be overheard by any outsiders. There was no sense of things being heard and rumors being spread in the village that exaggerated the situation. "Hello dear," Minato said as he signed off on the current scroll he was working on before looking up at his wife. He noticed her standing there, but he couldn't make out her emotions because, for lack of a better word, they were blank. "Is there something wrong? I was given this note to deliver to you," Kushina said matter-of-factly as she stepped forward and handed it to him. He took it from her grasp and examined it before saying anything. He just wanted to make sure it wasn't booby-trapped or something, but all he found was a simple wax seal. He didn't pay much attention to the wax seal, or he would have noticed the actual seal engraved into it. Who sent this message?
Minato wondered, as there was no indication of who had sent it. Naruto did, Kushina said, her tone emotionless as before.
"It was important, and you needed to see it right away," she said. Minato's eyes widened as he heard this and he easily ripped the seal off the scroll to read the message inside, oblivious to Kushina shaking in place. She clenched her teeth, suppressing her rage at his one single action that seemed insignificant to many, but she knew better. The fact that Minato was able to open the scroll after breaking the seal meant that he was related to Naruto, and her fears of the truth were spilling over to the point of tears. But Minato was too preoccupied with the message Naruto could have sent him to notice her reactions right now. He was expecting some sort of gloating or threat, but all he saw was a single line of text with a seal beneath it for storing something. Minato raised an eyebrow as he read what was written. "The family who rejected me because I was not the spawn of the monster they desired me to be." Minato noticed the seal beneath the first line when he looked at it. He wondered what he meant by that, because the statement was not only out of context because there was no build-up to it or anything else to explain it, but it was also difficult to understand because it was written so strangely. However, noticing a seal beneath the written text, he placed his finger on it and activated the device. A simple napkin emerged from the seal, but it caused Minato's eyes to widen in surprise. It was common knowledge in Fire Country that the former Kan family was both vain and greedy. Almost everything they owned had their family crest somewhere on it, and according to rumors, even their employees had it as well as a brand of some sort. So seeing a napkin with their well-known crest on it spoke volumes, but not as much as seeing a blood-soaked napkin like this. Minato, like many others, had wondered what had happened to the Kan family. They knew there was a large mob who robbed and slaughtered them all, but there was nothing to point the finger at any specific person because the evidence was too. Well, there was just too much of it to single people out. When Minato saw this napkin, he realized that Naruto himself had somehow orchestrated such a thing. He most likely discovered his family and exacted vengeance on those who didn't care about him and wanted him to rot away. This did not bode well for Minato because if Naruto was willing to do such a thing against one of the Fire Country's most powerful families, he would have no qualms about coming after him personally. But what Minato didn't realize about that napkin was that, while Naruto had taken it as a souvenir of his successful plan, the blood on it was not from the Kan family at all. Given that he had left the room as his former family was being murdered and only grabbed the napkin on his way out the door, it was his. He dipped the thing in his blood to heighten the impact of the message it would send to Minato, as it was now. But now that he knew what the napkin represented, Minato saw that there was more to the message because it was designed to show one part at a time so that he understood what each line truly meant in full. The madman who tried so hard to use death as a weapon against everyone from the shadows, like the coward he was. The seal this time ejected a cracked root mask, which made Minato's rage boil even higher than it already was with his daughter in the hospital. Minato had done extensive research into what had happened to his hidden root forces, and he now knew Naruto was to blame with this single written sentence. He wasn't sure how that worked, but given that the boy had been able to eliminate every last squad of them, he had ordered Danzo to send out to capture him and bring him to Konoha to begin his re-education. It wasn't a stretch to believe he was capable of eliminating Root like he did. He'd seen Danzo's body in a glass cage, of all places, with his arm blown off and the cause of death unknown. Minato couldn't tell if it was due to a lack of blood from his amputated limb or a lack of air because the machine meant to pump it in was broken. He had learned what had happened from another Root member because the glass box was built to contain Naruto in a way he couldn't escape, but he knew nothing about the events of that day because the only people who survived what Naruto had done were those who weren't there at all. The psycho who almost took what I cared about the most in this world. This seal ejected a bloody, bent Hayate. One that bore the imprint of the now defunct Kiri. Because the pieces were all there for him to see with his own eyes, Minato was just missing confirmation like this. The fact that the ice user Haku possessed the power of the three-tailed Biju, the same one that the former Mizukage Yagura himself used, nailed it. But the revelation raised more questions than it answered, because if Naruto had fought for the rebels, as killing Yagura implied, why hadn't they won the war in the end? The battlefield displayed the bodies of both sides, but there was no clear winner because the end result was the abolition of Kiri as a major village. These people have all paid the price for enraged me in some way, but you have gone above and beyond. You abandoned me, attempted to erase my existence in order to bury your secret, and then had the audacity to prevent me from succeeding in life by denying me the opportunity to do so. But now look at me. I've become so popular that everyone who hears about me wants me to live in their towns. You are among them. I find it amusing that you tried so hard to stifle my life and then tried so hard to control it when it became worthwhile. I warned you the day you came to me, certain that your plan to use a Yamanaka to force my loyalty to the village had succeeded, that I would take away everything you cared about. That the world would know the truth about the monster you truly were, and so far I am succeeding far more than you have. I've already taken your daughter away from you in a way she will never recover from, because the poison I injected her with was specifically designed to kill her. She will suffer for the rest of her life, every second of every minute of every day, and there is no cure. This is how she made my life until the day I left this abominable place, and I returned the pain with 16 years worth of interest. I've taken one of the three things you value the most from you, and I assure you that the second isn't far behind. And soon, the third will be gone as well. Signed. Your abandoned son. Naruto. P.S. I just wanted you to know that when you're gone. If you die at my hands, your clan name will die with you because I was never a Namikaze and will never be one. I'm smarter than that. Minato raged as he finished reading the message. How dare this brat threaten him in this manner? Insulting the very Namikaze clan name, which instilled fear in most people who heard it because of what he had done to earn it such notoriety in the previous Shinobi War. Did he have any idea who he was challenging in this manner? It wasn't until he looked up that he noticed Kushina standing there with her hands clenched into fists and her tears streaming down her cheeks. When? Was all she could manage to say in the end. Her rage prevented her from saying anything more than that one word, but it said a lot. What are you talking about, Kushina? Minato, who honestly didn't understand why she was acting this way, asked. When did you go behind my back and cheat on me, you bastard? Demanded Kushina, her rage making her hair appear more alive in order for her to express herself better. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Minato said, breaking out in a cold sweat. He never imagined that Kushina, of all people, would discover the truth, and he feared her wrath because she was not one to hold back her rage. Don't lie to me, screamed Kushina, unable to hold back his rage. I swear to God, I have no idea what you're on about. That scroll, Kushina said, pointing to the scroll he'd just finished reading. The wax seal you ripped off in order to open it? It had a seal engraved on it. A very specific one that can only be opened by those with Naruto's genetics, which, given your age, paints a very clear picture. Minato's face turned white as he heard this because he hadn't paid attention to the seal closely enough to see it. To think Naruto would do something like that for a message. But then the message's line came back to him. I've taken one of the 3 things you value the most from you, and I assure you that the second isn't far behind. It made sense now, because he had sent Kushina a scroll proving his infidelity, and she was an Uzumaki who could easily recognize various seals. He'd been set up by that fucking brat. And now I will ask again, Kushina said as she threw the desk in front of her against the wall, shattering it to splinters and scattering the papers on it all over the place. When did you start cheating on me? Look, Kushina, it was a fling I had before we dated, Minato began, trying to find a way out of this awkward situation. I did not defraud you. Do I look like an idiot? Exclaimed Kushina as she used her chakra chains to bind Minato in place. That boy is the same age as our daughter. So you slept with someone else while we were still dating? You thieving jerk. Kushina then balled her hand into a fist and prepared to slug her husband, but she fell short by a few inches. Minato was understandably flinching with his eyes closed, but Kushina never hit him. Her mind was essentially frozen right now as the truth about Naruto dawned on her. She had openly despised the boy for what he had done to Naruto, but now, as her body erupted in rage, a moment of clarity washed over her. She remembered what he had told her about his past during the Chunin exams, about being abandoned by his father and having no name, so that if he died, no one would even remember him because his mother had died before him. She could understand his rage at those who had everything attempting to take everything from someone who had nothing. The anguish he must have felt at being hurt by his own half-sister, a constant reminder that he was not wanted by the man who lavished praise on his daughter but said nothing about his own son. In that brief moment of clarity, she not only fully understood his reasons for doing what he did, but she also completely agreed with him. This caused her brain to stop working because she was about to hit Minato but couldn't bring herself to do so. So she untied him from his shackles and began to walk away from him, wiping her tears away. To think she loved and had a family with a man who was cold enough to abandon his own son in favor of all people he had with another. It's bad enough to cheat on someone, but you also have to accept responsibility for your actions, which Minato failed to do, leaving his own child to die in the shadows. If she had lived that way, she would despise the man and everything about him. Kushina, Minato said, terrified of what was about to happen next. He had expected her to slug him hard, but she didn't, so that had to be a good sign, right? I'm done, Minato, Kushina stated emphatically. I'm going home, packing my belongings, and moving out. I'm going to leave you. So I hope the sex was worth it back then, you fucking asshole, because it cost you not only your daughter, but also your wife. She then ripped the seal off the door and slammed it shut behind her, leaving Minato alone in the room. Normally, after losing so much in such a short period of time, a man would reflect on his choices and wonder how he got to this point, but Minato was too vain and proud to do so. So, do you know what was going through his mind right now? Naruto aversion. Right now, he was blaming Naruto for pretty much everything that was going wrong in his life, and it was visible in his eyes, which were easily seen becoming clouded with madness. Things were going so well until that brat ruined everything. Why hadn't he done what he wanted and killed him or sent Danzo after him to make him a root member sooner? But now the boy had taken too much from him, and Minato was dead sure he was going to make Naruto pay for it. In the end, Naruto would know his place as a shinobi, even if it meant destroying everything the boy cared about down to the last detail in order to instill the deepest of fears in the brat. 2 weeks later. Naruto was cheerful today. He recently assisted 2 different people in making positive changes in their lives. The first was Neji, who was finally able to be placed into his new body and return to the world. Neji had taken some time to adjust to his new appearance, which wasn't all that different from his previous appearance. Only his eyes had changed. They were no longer the ones with the obvious Byakugan characteristics of gray and pupilless. They looked normal now, but retained all of the Byakugan's abilities. He had assisted the man by inquiring as to what he wanted to do with his life now. Surprisingly, Neji desired to be a chef of all things, which made him chuckle because Fu had wished to be the same. So Naruto introduced him to the same man who owned the restaurant that he had previously shown Fu. The owner was an excellent teacher who showed Neji the ropes. While he still had a lot to learn, he was a natural and picked up the lessons quickly. While Neji worked hard to achieve his newfound dream of being free of the shackles of servitude that he had been forced to endure for the majority of his life, he unexpectedly became closer to Fu on a more personal level. Naruto wasn't sure how it happened, especially since Neji would lose his cool if a girl was interested in him in the first place. He'd always been a strict, no-nonsense type of person, but now that he wasn't a branch member and thus wasn't constantly judged, he could act better. Naruto was overjoyed that Neji had found someone, and that his friend Fu was overjoyed that Neji had found someone. But their relationship was their own business, and he was busy elsewhere right now. He hadn't been to any of the orphanages he'd been supporting in a long time, and he couldn't wait to see the children's smiling faces as he spent time with them. So he went to town and bought sweets for the kids because they loved it so much, and once he had everything packed up for transport, he made a door to walk through before making another to walk out next to one of the orphanages. He always appeared outside and never inside because he didn't want to scare anyone inside with a randomly appearing door. In one of the orphanages, an older boy was already spreading rumors about the place being haunted, and he wasn't about to add fuel to the fire. But then he made a door to walk out and greet the children of the orphanage he chose, and his good day was shattered beyond repair. The smell of smoke was the first thing he noticed when he opened the door, but it was tinged with something else he couldn't quite place. But the moment he fully opened the door, he realized what that smell was. What he saw was the entire building burned to the ground, with only embers remaining to show that the fires had been put out recently, but that enough time had passed for the flames to die down. Naruto dashed forward, hoping beyond hope that the children and the matriarch of the establishment were safe and that it had been a simple fire with few to no casualties. But as he got closer, his concerns about the situation grew because he recognized the smell of smoke. Charred flesh. He had previously treated the wounds of many people who had suffered various types of burns, so he was familiar with the odor. That wasn't a good thing right now because it only made his mind paint a more gruesome picture. As he walked through the rubble, tears welled up in his eyes as he saw the charred bodies of the children who were always so happy when he came to visit. He picked up the burnt remains of a teddy bear. He remembered giving this bear to a little girl who was sad because her parents had been killed by bandits and feared just about everyone in life. Naruto had bought her this toy to help her feel safe in the world, and it worked because she became happier as time passed, but now her life had been snuffed out like her own parents, causing a tear to fall from his eyes. He searched the ruins, but all he found were the remains of the people who had lived there. There were far too many to count, indicating that few, if any, had escaped. But the worst scene was yet to be discovered by him, as it occurred when he arrived at the back of the area where the playground was located. Naruto collapsed to his knees in despair after witnessing the horrific image. The bodies of the children who had escaped the building were discovered in the back. But unlike the others, these were not burned. They were all carrying one or more kunai and/or shuriken. Whatever monster had done this had slaughtered these children as they fled for their lives. Naruto sobbed as he fell to his knees. The scene was unbearable. But then a horrible thought occurred to him. If this was the fate of the orphanage, did the other orphanages suffer the same fate? Naruto wasted no time in summoning a door to his operating room to go check. He was praying to Kami right now that his fears were unfounded. Later that day, Spring Country. Yuna was on her way back to her apartment, her medical study books in hand and a smile on her face. Life seemed good to her since she went from being an orphan on the streets to being the assistant to a man who not only paid for her to survive, but also saved her life when she was kidnapped, paid for her schooling, and was giving her a better future than she had expected years before. So, yeah. She was in a good mood. But her happy mood was shattered when she saw two men dressed in the dark clothes of a shinobi lockpicking the front door down the street from her house. She just stood there because she had no idea what she was supposed to do here. But when one of the men saw her standing there, he pulled out a kunai to finish her off because their orders were clear and there would be no witnesses to what they were about to do. Yuna screamed and attempted to flee, but the man threw the kunai at her. His aim had been precise, and he would have hit his intended target. If one thing hadn't happened right then. Shambles, Naruto said as he used his room's power to switch places with Yuna. The kunai pierced his chest deeply, but he felt no pain and it did not pass through any vital organs, so he would recover quickly. He yanked the kunai from him and charged towards the man, who unsheathed his sword to defend himself, but Naruto threw the kunai he yanked from him, still covered in blood, into the man's leg. The man stopped in pain for a split second, and Naruto used that split second to grab the man by the face and stare deep into his masked face. What a surprise! The area was illuminated as the electrical power he conjured up to harm this man ignited. Naruto truly wanted to kill this man because no one ever hurt Yuna or even attempted to, and Scott escaped. But he needed the man to be alive in order to get answers to his questions. His partner tried to flee, but not before attempting to kill the other man with a kunai to permanently silence him. However, Naruto noticed this and prevented the kunai from striking by swapping the man and the weapon with another, Shambles. When he was within grabbing distance, he shocked the man unconscious again and told Yuna to go to his house and stay there until he said otherwise. Yuna had complete faith in him and ran as fast as her young legs could carry her to his house. Naruto dragged the two men into his office and then threw them in. He opened their mouths and pulled out their tongues to see if these men, like all root members, had seals on their tongues, and to his chagrin, they did. He sat there, unsure of what to do next. He could torture these men for information all he wanted, but they wouldn't give anything up because of that fucking seal. He needed answers because whoever had burned down the orphanages would be held fully accountable. And if he got his hands on that person, he was not going to kill them quickly. He would continue to torture and then heal before repeating the process indefinitely. He knew Danzo would be the type of person to kill innocent people because he was a monster, but he was no longer alive because Naruto had killed him. Put him in a position where he couldn't escape as he bled, suffocated to death, but that was just semantics. He deliberated on how to obtain the answers he sought, but what he really needed was a seal master akin to the Uzumaki of old. Naruto groaned as he considered this, because he knew of one Uzumaki who was skilled with seals, and after poisoning her daughter, he doubted she would assist him in any way. But he owed it to the orphans to give it a shot. So he summoned a door and walked through it to find the woman, who would no doubt despise seeing him now more than ever. 1 hour later in the Forest of Death. Naruto was inside the forest, but not too far in because he was hoping to see someone. He had sent a crow with a message for said person to meet with him, and all he could hope for was that she would come as he requested because this was very important. Fortunately for him, Kushina arrived promptly, albeit with a sour expression on her face. "You have some nerve not only coming here," huffed Kushina, who was irritated. When she saw the name on the scroll that had been delivered to her, she wanted to rip it up. But something in the back of her mind warned her not to, and in the end, that part of her mind won the internal conflict. The message had been brief, asking her to meet him in the Forest of Death because he needed her assistance with something. The message didn't say what that something was, but it had to be important if the same young man who knew she was mad at him was asking for her help by name. She had been in the midst of packing all of her belongings because she could no longer live in this house because she planned to divorce Minato, so she had plenty of time on her hands. However, asking to meet with me of all people is going too far. "I know," Naruto said sadly, which Kushina easily picked up on. For some reason, her maternal instincts kicked in, and she began to wonder what had gotten the young man so worked up. He appeared to be broken right now, a stark contrast to the confident yet sadistic man she had seen not long ago during the exams. "And, given our history, I would not normally ask for your assistance in this manner." Nonetheless, you are the only seal master I am aware of, and I require your assistance with a seal that I am unable to break. And why would I assist you in breaking a seal if you refused to heal my daughter? That's a separate issue I don't want to get into, Naruto sighed. He was expecting her to bring it up at some point. However, this aid is not for me. It is for the nearly 1,000 orphan children who have been slaughtered and whose deaths I seek to avenge. What? Kushina exclaimed, surprised because that was not what she expected to hear. I've been funding multiple orphanages all over the elemental continent, Naruto explained simply, and I recently learned that they'd all been attacked, with the children inside slaughtered and the building burning in around them. I couldn't save any of them because they were all gone, but the same group responsible for the deed attempted to kill a little girl I was tutoring. I was able to save myself here, but the problem I'm currently dealing with is that they have a fucking seal on their tongues that prevents them from saying who sent them. Seals on their tongues, Kushina reflected as she remembered shinobi with them in the past. How about Danzo's root shinobi? Not like his root shinobi, Naruto corrected with a snarl. It wasn't aimed at her in the least, but at the fact that a shadowy organization that literally did so many horrific things to get their way and that he was convinced he had completely eliminated was still around to do so. They're called root shinobi. If that's the case, Kushina said, knowing who sent them and that Danzo was a monster who wouldn't be affected by such atrocities. You should know who sent them by now. It's not that simple, Naruto pointed out, because I killed Danzo a while ago. So who sent these men now that their leader has been dead for a while? Danzo is dead? Kushina inquired, surprised. She had always suspected that the elderly man would die as a result of his actions, but hearing that it had actually occurred was shocking. The same girl I just saved? Said Naruto with a simple nod of his head. He kidnapped her in a futile attempt to blackmail me into serving him. He basically threatened to kill her if I didn't do what he asked. His plan didn't go as planned, however, because I flipped the script on him and killed not only him, but what I assumed was his entire army. But I must have overlooked some. Thought Kushina, who, like Naruto, was perplexed as to who would lead their group now that Danzo had died. He was stubborn and greedy, so he was not one to share power or anything else, now that she thought about it. He was the type of person who would ensure that his organization could not function without him, eliminating the possibility of betrayal, so how is someone running his organization in his place? So I'm asking you to help me with one thing only, Naruto said, waving his hand passively, not for me, but for the children. I'll help you, Kushina said, but Naruto could tell she was going to add conditions to their agreement. Naruto anticipated her question and cut her off before she could utter a single syllable of her request. No, Naruto stated emphatically. No what? Kushina asked, perplexed. I knew you were going to demand that I heal Naruto in exchange for your assistance, so I simply said no because I won't do it. Then I won't help you with the seals, Kushina said authoritatively. In her mind, she knew exactly what Naruto needed right now, and she planned to use this information as leverage to get him to heal her. Fine, Naruto said as he summoned a door and started walking towards it. I'll just have to find another seal master who will. Wait! Exclaimed Kushina, stunned that Naruto had essentially foregone any sort of negotiations to heal Naruto despite the fact that she possessed the skills he required to the point where he sought her out. Is your hatred for my daughter so strong that you would not bargain for the thing you most need for her health? Yes, Naruto said simply as he came to a halt a few feet from his door. Why won't you heal her? Exclaimed Kushina, who was on the verge of tears at this point. As a mother, she wanted her daughter to be healed so she could learn from her mistakes and become a better person as a result. Why are you so obstinate? Stubborn? Inquired Naruto as he turned his head to look at Kushina from the side. Okay, Kushina, you've persuaded me. Naruto will be healed. Oda. Began Kushina before Naruto held up his hand to silence her thanks. I'll heal her if you can show me one time when she genuinely showed kindness to someone her own age who wasn't part of her clan's heirs. And if you're lying, I'll know, so go ahead and tell me. I'm listening. Kushina was speechless as she pondered what he had asked her to consider. She went back in time to remember a time when Naruto had been kind to someone, but it hadn't occurred to her until now that she only hung out with the other clan heirs. She even mistreated her own squadmate Sakura, now that she thinks about it. And that is my point, Naruto explained. You want me to heal a monster dressed in human skin. But. Kushina said, but she was still at a loss for words. Your daughter took pleasure in the suffering of others, Naruto explained, with me being the first person she did it to. When I left, she did the same to others like me in that no one knew they existed in the first place. How do you know this? Kushina inquired, clearly concerned. My hatred for her became a little obsessional over the years, Naruto explained, and so I learned enough about her over the years. Along with her friends, she harmed 4 others who the village would not forget. She had no remorse for what she had done, and 3 of them committed suicide as a result of their suffering. They killed the 4th one by severely injuring him and leaving him there. His parents were unable to afford proper medical treatment for his injuries, and he died from internal bleeding in that alley. But she didn't mind because they were insignificant in the eyes of the public. Kushina was crying at this point because she had no idea her daughter was such a monster, as Naruto had said. While a part of her mind still thought he was lying to her, the logical part of her mind told her that he wasn't. He had basically told her about her own husband's lack of loyalty, so she was inclined to believe that his words about her daughter were true. Whatever monstrous tendencies he had were apparently passed down to their daughter, and it hurt to see the truth. So I don't care what you offer, Naruto snarled, whether it's money, power, or some rare material the likes of which I've never seen before. I will never heal such a monster so she can continue her sick ways on someone else. So, now that you know the truth, I'll leave you to seek assistance from someone more knowledgeable about seals. Wait! Exclaimed Kushina again as she wiped her tears away. What is it now? Said Naruto, rolling his eyes. Time is of the essence here, and I need to find a seal master as soon as possible. I'll help you, Kushina said calmly. Really? Said Naruto, raising an eyebrow because he had not expected this. He expected Kushina to be in a funk when she learned the truth about her family's monstrous nature. He'd told her the truth about Naruto so she could move on, because her daughter was a terrible person who was not worth all the tears when she caused equal amounts of pain to those who didn't deserve it. It had taken a lot of detective work, as well as the help of his crows, to find the files and such, but he was able to piece the puzzle together because he had suffered in the same way as their victims, so he knew their methods as well as their tactics. Yes, Kushina said as she approached the door, but I'm not doing this for you. You essentially murdered my daughter, and I will never forgive you. I simply want to ensure that whoever is responsible for the deaths of so many innocent children cannot do it again. That's all I wanted, Naruto said as he opened the door for her, and for what it's worth, I'm sorry things went so wrong. No parent should have to go through this, but when you make a habit of reveling in the misery of others, it never ends well. Kushina simply nodded, having spoken the truth, and then entered the door leading to their destination. The following day, Naruto sat at his desk, a large stack of scrolls on top of him. He was sitting there thinking about what to say to the world. He was trying to calm down, but it was difficult with what he had learned and the rage that was keeping him awake all night. Haku had easily picked up on this and left him alone because she was afraid of what he would do to her if he directed that much concentrated rage at her. Kushina had been a huge help in breaking the seal on the root shinobi's tongues, and once it was broken, Naruto had gone to work on making them spill their secrets. The good thing about his abilities was that he could hurt people beyond the point of no return while keeping them alive. So, after a few hours of metaphorically and literally tearing those men apart, he got the answers he sought. But the answers only fueled his rage even more than he expected, and he let it be known as he burned them alive slowly inside out as he roared in rage. Kushina was equally outraged and appalled by the truth, but Naruto asked her to keep quiet for a while. He told her he had a solution to the problem, and Kushina agreed because she didn't want to deny him his vengeance against the monster that sent the root shinobi. So now he was staring at the open scroll, the right words for what to write coming to him. He felt as if he was slowly losing himself to his rage, but just as he was about to, the memory of his mother appeared before him and extended a hand to pull him out. Naruto had shed only one tear as her memory had saved him from succumbing to his rage, and with that, his mind was clear, and he began to write the first of many message scrolls that would be sent out. To whoever reads this scroll, I say that on the account that I have written many with the same message in full word for word and sent them throughout the elemental nation to let the truth be heard. My name is Naruto, or as many have heard of me, the surgeon of death, the doctor with the ability to heal many diseases once thought to be incurable, as well as the skills to defend myself from those who try to force me to submit in various ways. As many people are aware, since my name became well known, most, if not all, villages have been attempting to recruit me as one of their own, and I can see why, as having someone with my ability to heal things would be a valuable asset. But I've turned down all such offers because I believe that medicine is a universal thing and that all people are worthy of healing. Sure, I charge for it, but materials to heal others are expensive, and I need to eat, so I do what I can. I'm sending these scrolls to inform you of a horrible event that occurred, but the truth must be told so that the party responsible does not get away with what they did. I have privately funded 14 separate orphanages throughout the elemental countries, not for any personal gain, but simply because I am an orphan and know how it feels to be alone, and I want to help the children so their lives are better than mine were when I was that age. But now, that's no longer a problem I can help with. I recently went to one of the orphanages I fund to check on the kids and help the sick if they needed it, as I do from time to time, but when I arrived, the orphanage was nothing more than charred wood that was still smoking from the fires that had just died down. I wept because there were burnt corpses of the children I had helped among the rubble. But what I quickly discovered turned my grief into rage. The bodies of children and a few adults who were the building's caretakers were found in the backyard. They were murdered, not killed by the fire. With the kunai still in their backs, or the few unfortunate souls with bleed-out cuts, or the one I saw who was completely decapitated. In fear, I quickly went to the other orphanages and witnessed the same exact scene. Who could harm children in this way? What monster orders the execution of innocent civilians who have no allegiance to anyone and are only trying to survive? I got my response a day later, and it only made matters worse. I have taken it upon myself to help one orphan in such a way that she now has her own place and is at the top of her class in school. She, like me, aspires to be a doctor and is working hard to achieve that goal. 2 men wearing the insignia of the organization known as Root arrived at her house with orders to kill her, but not because she posed any kind of threat. No, they were ordered to kill her in the same way that the rest of the orphan children were slaughtered to send a message to me. Fortunately, I was there to save her life, but they had a seal on their tongues to keep their mission orders or the identity of who sent them to do the deed from being revealed. While some of you may be familiar with the original Root leader, Danzo Shimura, he has been dead for some time, and I can confirm this because I was the one who put an end to him when he attempted to enslave me by threatening the life of a hostage. I was able to break the seal on them and get them to talk with the help of a seal master. The seal at the bottom of this scroll contains full copies of their confession videos as well as photographs of the deceased orphans to show you exactly what I had to see with my own eyes. But, before I reveal who ordered such atrocities, allow me to explain why he did so. My name is Naruto, and I intend to keep it that way because my last name is cursed now more than ever. But, for the sake of completeness, my surname is Namikaze. I am Minato Namikaze's bastard son, one he never claimed until I made a name for myself as I am now. My mother's name was Mocha, and she was the estranged daughter of the Kan family of Fire Country. She had left her home and family to be with Minato out of love, but he had done so out of greed because he wanted a piece of her family's enormous wealth. But when he discovered the truth about her abandonment, he abandoned her just a month before I was born. My mother had only known a noble life, so she struggled to make ends meet while supporting me. I was all she had left in the world, and she loved me as much as I loved her. But time weakened her resolve, and she needed assistance. So she went to beg the man who sired their child for help, but he not only hurt her to send a message, but he also threatened my life and hers if she ever returned. My mother never recovered from that day and fell into a deep depression from which she never recovered. After 2 weeks, she passed away, leaving me alone in the world with no parents. I only learned these truths for myself after discovering her journal, and I set out to become strong enough to face the man who refused to acknowledge my existence one day. But he tried to ruin my future by signing paperwork that barred me from ever entering the Shinobi Academy for fear of being discovered by those he didn't want to know about me, namely his own family that he started elsewhere, one that everyone knows about because it's public knowledge. So I left the village to become who I am now. And, since my name became known, Konoha forces have made numerous attempts to compel me to serve them. Regardless of what they sent, I did not submit. Multiple route ambushes, multiple Yamanaka clan members attempting to bend my mind into submission, and now this. Minato Namikaze himself was the mastermind behind this tragedy. Years ago, I vowed vengeance for making my life a living hell by not assisting me and sabotaging my attempts to become something, and I told him this personally as he tried in vain to convince me to join Konoha in the belief that the Yamanaka he had delved into my mind had succeeded in his task. But when he found out it had failed, he became violent and nearly used force again, but he refrained because the numerous connections I have all over would only be a major hindrance to the village if angered. Minato is a monster who dislikes it when things do not go his way, and since I had repeatedly refused to join his forces, he decided to show me what he was capable of in order to scare me into submission. But I will not submit as he requested. I've decided to tell the world about his crimes against not only myself, but also the other children he ordered slaughtered in some twisted attempt to force me to submit. So I ask everyone who sees the truth, will you not let me avenge them all? To seek the justice we rightfully deserve? I eagerly await your responses. The Death Surgeon. Naruto Law. The newly formed Law Clan's founder. He took the pictures he mentioned in the letter, as well as one of many copies of the video, and sealed it at the bottom before rolling up the scroll and summoning a crow. He showed him the list of locations to which he was sending these messages, with all of the recipients being higher-ups in their countries, such as daimyos and noble men and women. The crow read the first name and flew away to deliver the first of many messages written by Naruto. He was lucky to have shadow clones to help him, or else this would take forever. Minato had done everything he could to scare him into joining Konoha, but Naruto was going to turn the tables on him and show the world what kind of monster he truly was. When he was in Konoha for the Chunin exams, he warned the man that he was friends with many influential people, but the man had apparently gone insane and forgotten that bit of information as he ordered his shinobi to commit such atrocities. And when the rest of the world saw what Minato would do to win in the end and get his way, nobody would mourn his death. But, while all of this was going on, with his letters being sent to anyone and everyone who could spread the word about the atrocities that had been committed, a large funeral was taking place in Konoha for the once proud kunoichi Naruko Uzumaki Namikaze. Multiple doctors had tried time and again to heal her from the poison she had been injected with, but Naruto had done his job too well, making a cure impossible. Minato realized he couldn't let his daughter suffer like this any longer and was the one who gave her a lethal dose of adrenaline so she could finally rest in peace. All of her friends who were still alive and able to attend, as well as family members, had attended the funeral, which was now nearing its conclusion with the body being laid to rest. Minato was furious that Naruto had done this to him, and he could only smirk inwardly because his retaliation strike would harm Naruto even more. The brat had not submitted through force or even my mental conversion, so he would instill fear in the brat, fear that he had the power to kill anyone he cared about, until the boy begged him to stop. Even so, Minato would not. He wanted Naruto to be a broken mess so that he could be molded into a subservient member of their village. But, as Minato's mind delved deeper into his insane logistical thought process, one person was thinking about something entirely different. Jiraiya was a sage who had been told by his summons years before about a prophecy involving one of his students becoming the key to the survival or destruction of the shinobi way itself. It stated that an Uzumaki containing the Kyuubi would be trained by him, but now that Naruto had died, it appeared that the prophecy had died with her and would never come to fruition. He hadn't told anyone because he was afraid of what others would do with this information, because people could be greedy and try to manipulate it for their own gain, but he wasn't like that. Sure, he peered at women and was a huge pervert, but that was the least of his problems. He was thinking big picture here, wanting to see what the future held with the prophecy itself being fulfilled, but that was no longer possible. But the thing about destiny is that many people think they know everything, but there's always more to it than meets the eye. It never turned out the way people expected. As an example, in the entire history of the Uzumaki clan, only one person had ever been exiled from the clan itself. The reasons for this happened, as well as the man's name, were lost to time. But that man was stripped down to nothing, with numerous seals robbing him of his strength as well as all knowledge given to him by his now former family, so he would remember nothing of them and his descendants would benefit from their genetics. They'd still have them, but there'd be no benefits from them. That man would wander until he found his calling as a merchant, where he would meet the woman who would bear his child, and it was that son who would go on to found the Kan family of Fire Country. A political family so powerful that no one would dare to oppose them except the Fire Daimyo himself. This has been true for generations. At least, until the last surviving member of the family orchestrated their annihilation, leaving only him with their genetics. And, wouldn't you know it, the boy who had done what many thought was impossible had discovered a way to acquire the Kyuubi within himself, and to top it off, he had been taught by Jiraiya. Even though it was only one jutsu, the man taught it to him. As I previously stated, destiny. It never turns out the way people expect.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.